Marine One with Laura Bush, Mrs. Bush, after dealing with an array of issues today, from updating the war on terrorism, the fighting in that's underway in Afghanistan, to the newest information today about a fourth person in the United States exposed to anthrax, a woman in New York City. That case, we're told, has yet to be absolutely confirmed, but it does look as if this woman did contract anthrax through her skin. For the very latest on that and in the other day's developments, let's go quickly down to Atlanta and CNN's Joey Chen. Joey.
Judy, thanks. Good afternoon. The NBC News employee, as you said, who tested positive for a form of anthrax contracted through the skin, is taking antibiotics. She is said to be in good condition this afternoon. Authorities have meantime sealed off parts of Rockefeller Center in New York where the woman did work. Her health is monitored after the network received mail last month containing suspicious white powder. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani also announced today that the New York Times has also received a suspicious envelope. The substance there is being tested for anthrax. Initial tests show suspicious powders found today in a State Department office in Washington and at a post office in Colorado are not dangerous. In Florida, where 3 employees of a tabloid publishing firm were exposed to anthrax, the FBI says more than 900 people have been tested for the bacteria and no new exposures to anthrax have been found. All this as U.S. forces are holding their fire in Afghanistan. The Pentagon says no strikes were planned for today because Friday is the Muslim holy day. In Pakistan, meantime, a 5th day of protests against the U.S.-led airstrikes turned violent in some cities. In Karachi, demonstrators torched a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant and several cars there as well. Police and paramilitary troops were deployed to keep the peace. Now back to Judy in Washington.
Thanks, Joey. I want to get an update now on that investigation into the latest confirmed case of exposure to anthrax. We did get a little more information from the Attorney General today, but let's turn now to our national affairs correspondent, Eileen O'Connor. Eileen.
Well, Judy, the Attorney General says that so far law enforcement does not believe that this was related, at least the cases in Florida certainly, and they're looking into the one that exposed the
guy, and this giant white slab of building just falls down.
On September 11th, teenager Max Willens witnessed terror no kid should ever face. He and hundreds of other students from New York's Stuyvesant High School were forced to flee the terrorist attacks. That's Stuyvesant, the first building on the right, just blocks from Ground Zero.
People started screaming and crying and holding each other. It was nuts.
Senior Liz O'Callahan was in gym class when the planes hit.
For a while they were saying this is the safest place where you can be, but eventually they decided to evacuate the building and send us all north.
This week, Liz and her classmates made the emotional return to Stuyvesant. Almost a month had passed since the attacks, and Liz was nervous about what lay ahead.
I'm okay with it right now, and we'll see what happens as the day goes on.
The students here are the brightest of the bright. They have to take a difficult admissions test, and they have big dreams. But things at Stuyvesant aren't the same anymore. Security's tight. There are people wearing gas masks. The football team even has to get a police escort because they're so close to Ground Zero. When the attacks began, it was first period. Some class windows looking right at the World Trade Center. Now back at school, the kids are facing their memories.
I saw everything just black. I was like, oh my God. And then I went crazy, and I was crying, and I was hysterical.
16-year-old Christina was in physics when chaos broke out.
We just ran down the stairs, and we kept running, and every exit we got to was blocked off because, you know, the teachers didn't know what to do. They didn't want to let us out, but they couldn't keep us in.
16-year-old Jennifer was in math. She says as the Twin Towers burned, the teachers tried to keep the kids calm. But after the first building fell, the students were ordered to evacuate.
I look over my shoulder, and there's a huge cloud of smoke, and there's no more Twin Towers, and that killed me.
There are all these people wearing all this protection gear and all these masks, and their voices are all muffled. They're going, run, run, run. And, you know, we're just kids. We have nowhere to go.
Now, so many of these teenagers are dealing with their emotional scars.
Just every single plane, it seems too low, and every noise seems too loud.
Getting back to normal will be hard because few here know what normal is anymore. And while they're looking forward to their future, they will never forget September 11th.
People are getting over it. People are talking about other things, but you're never going to forget this. 3 years from now, people are going to be talking about it.
No Stuyvesant student was seriously injured on September 11th. It's survival of the fittest on the show Survivor, and we will meet the first cast-off from the tribe coming up next. On today's Inside Track, Thursday.
A package that arrived by one of the professors, we believe, by accident into the school. It was opened and had a powdery type substance in it. From that point, we secured the area and also contained it. And we've also, at the same time, had another package arrive with a lady bringing it to our police department. And that's caused us a little bit of a logistics problem trying to deal with that here and actually secure part of our own police department.
So you've got two situations going on at the same time?
Yes, we do.
What about the people involved who actually handled initially those letters?
We're at this moment going through a decontamination process of those individuals that have handled it, and we've got coordination with the health department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation with us to guide us through this decontamination process.
Captain, in addition to I take the physical area has been sealed off, what about those people who were in and around that area? Have they also been sequestered?
Yes, they've been contained as well.
Mm-hmm. At this stage, what is everybody's sense in terms of their emotional position?
Well, I'm sure it's upsetting to these individuals that's involved in it. One of the threats we view, or one of the packages we view, might have a little bit more credibility to something could possibly be in it versus the other one. The other one, I think, is a minor incident. The one here at the police department.
Can you tell us where this envelope came from?
At this point, I don't have that information available.
All right.
Any idea on what was on the outside of it, though? I mean, was it marked personal or anything like that you've heard?
At this point, the case is still developing. We have officers on the scene.
Captain Blaine Wade with the Bristol Police Department, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll keep you all posted on what happens in this case. And, as we were mentioning earlier, during these times, all of us are on edge.
Certainly,
you look at the letters you get in the mail, you wonder if you should open them or not. All across the country, people are looking for some kind of ways to make them feel more secure.
Yeah, FBI officials here in East Tennessee, in fact, held a news conference to try and do just that. WAT's Jennifer Carmack joins us now live from downtown Knoxville with more. Jennifer?
Well, Gene, the good news is the FBI says there is absolutely no indication that Knoxville is or could be a potential terrorist target. Nonetheless, no chances are being taken here. An FBI command post is up and running, open 24/7. Several Knoxville police officers and several sheriff's deputies from Knox County have been given clearance to work with the FBI. And acting U.S. Attorney General Russ Dedrick is heading an anti-terrorism task force to handle potential threats here in East Tennessee.
I want to assure the public that we're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to respond to any incident throughout this district and to work effectively and quickly with any other district around this country.
Now, the FBI is also working closely with the health department to deal with the potential anthrax scares.
These people come to drill to train once a month. They go to annual training for 2 weeks every year to train, and their sole mission.
Again, all threats are being taken seriously. If you receive anything suspicious in the mail, don't touch it, don't sniff it, don't smell it, but call the health department instead of calling 911. The health department can give you a better idea of what you can do from that point. But again, the most important thing to remember here, Gene and Lori, is use good common sense, and above all, don't panic.
Absolutely. All right. Really good information. Thank you, Jennifer. A local National Guard unit trained in high-tech communication will be helping with the fight against terrorism. The Knoxville-based 228th Combat Communications Squadron was deployed, as we told you yesterday. The reservists are not saying where they'll be working, but they say they are eager to serve their country.
These people come to drill to train once a month. They go to annual training for 2 weeks every year to train, and their sole mission is this job.
And Guard members say some employers are promising to match Guard members' pay and even pay their mortgage payments while they're away.
Well, the seemingly endless task of identifying the victims of the terrorist attacks of September 11th is utilizing the expertise of people all over the country. Two of those experts are from Knoxville. WAT's Yvette Martinez met two men who spent weeks trying to give families closure in this horrific event.
DMORT is an acronym. DMORT, and it stands for Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team. It's not just made up of mortuary people. It's made up of all types of forensics, pathologists, dentists, anthropologists.
Steve Tinder and Fred Berry, along with several members of the DMORT team, went to New York to help with the recovery efforts.
And just walking down half a block from where the morgue was set up into the center of ground zero, standing there looking at that, there's absolutely no way in words that are adequate to say what you felt.
Both men are used to dealing with death. They even teach courses on the subject.
Steve and I both have been teaching it in mass fatality courses for the last 5 years, that there was going to be an event with 5,000 to 10,000 people killed.
But even these trained professionals weren't prepared for what they saw and experienced firsthand.
This was an intentional murder of 5,000 plus people. And that alone, plus working with these people and living their emotions while we were there, just sends you through the gamut of basically everything you could think of.
And both men continue to relive the moments and memories of their weeks in New York.
It's a sight that you'll never forget, and it'll be a part of both of our lives, or everybody who responded to that for the rest of our lives.
Never be the same.
Another DMORT worker took a proposal to Mayor Rudy Giuliani to give the families urns filled with debris from the World Trade Center to help give them closure, because not all the bodies may be recovered. That proposal was approved. Arthur Bohannon is a world-renowned fingerprint specialist with DMORT. He's back in New York today, continuing to help identify more bodies. Jane?
And I understand DMORT has also helped in other disasters.
Yes, some DMORT workers went to the Pennsylvania plane crash site to help recover remains there. They also helped in another plane crash before the terrorist attacks, and that was in Guam.
All right, Yvette, thank you very much. Well, students across the country, including here in Knoxville, stopped for a moment today to recite a synchronized Pledge of Allegiance. These are students at Belmead Elementary in North Knoxville. U.S. Education Secretary Rod Page called for students in the U.S. to recite the pledge at the same time. So at 2 o'clock today, students stopped what they were doing to say the pledge.
Well, WATE is interested in your thoughts on our country's response to the attacks. Our 6 Listens poll question today is asking you, do you approve of how President Bush has responded to the attacks? To vote, call 671-2311 and choose option 6060. Press 1 if you approve. Press 2 if you don't. You can also vote online on the homepage of WATE.com, and we'll have results for you coming up tonight at 11. Well, Knoxville police officers answer a domestic call.
But the disturbance ends in a deadly shooting.
I'm Mark Ritchie. We're standing just a few feet from where this incident ended. I'll have a live report coming up.
You're watching WATE 6 News with Gene Patterson, Lori Tucker, Matt Hinken, and Jim Wogan. This is WATE 6.
All that glitters is gold. It shines through in every one of our dependable, long-lasting Chevy trucks. During Truck Month, keep America rolling with 0% APR financing on all Silverados and every new Chevy truck in stock. That's 0% APR financing on all Silverados. Only offers this good on trucks this durable. Get the gold bow tie. It's Truck Month. See your local Chevy dealer.
Win in Food City's $100,000 treasure hunt, and we'll send a Food City prize patrol to your house. Looking for Food City, Food Club, Pet Club,
or less than perfect.
America's Lending Partners has lenders who can help you. And best of all,
the service is free.
America's Lending Partners.
More lenders.
More options.
More solutions.
Call right now. 1-888-783-3667.
That's 1-888-783-3667.
Support Knoxville's own Fish Food Pantry by running, jogging, or walking the second annual Hops and Hope 5K on 3rd Creek Greenway, Saturday, October 13th. Race time 5 p.m. at the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. Also enjoy the fun-filled Oktoberfest celebration with great food, entertainment, and extraordinary brews. Entry forms available at Runner's Market and Knoxville New Balance, or visit www.ktc.org. Lend your fee to the Hops and Hope 5K Saturday, October 13th. Thanks to WVLT, Volunteer TV, Threads, Kroger, Oldies 93.1, and Comcast Cable.
Nobody beats Bergen.
A new case of anthrax, this time in the heart of New York City. It comes as the nation is on alert and on edge. Tonight, what you need to know about anthrax, what the risks are and or not of getting it, and the investigation into these latest cases. And as the war on terror builds, the president says, unite for the fight.
We need each other more than ever.
and we're responding as quickly and as forcefully as we can.
Plus, the air war slows. Amid some evidence from inside Afghanistan, it may be working. Breaking news on airline safety, and it's not a promising flight plan. And Eye on America, casualties of terror, remembering the sailors of the cold 1 year later.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Special expanded coverage, America on Guard. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. It is a somber time for this country. The United States government says you should be on alert because new terror attacks could come at any moment. American men and women in the military are risking their lives overseas in a war against a mass murder conspiracy. And today, a fourth case of anthrax confirmed. It's possibly delivered by mail here in New York City. The best weapon against fear is facts, and tonight CBS will give you as many facts as we possibly can. We have correspondents reporting from key locations across the country, and we begin in Washington, where Jim Stewart has the latest on the investigation of the new anthrax case here in New York. Jim?
Dan, the latest anthrax scares center around 2 letters mailed to news organizations in New York. And while both were postmarked St. Petersburg, Florida, it's still not clear that they have any connection or whether, in fact, they contained anything dangerous.
It is almost certainly not terrorism, but the discovery of a relatively mild case of skin anthrax in New York today was enough to send an already jittery nation right to the brink of panic. U.S. and New York City officials moved quickly to explain the case and urge calm.
No matter what you say, people are going to be, some people will be afraid, but they really don't have to be. The reality is that this is being looked at. This looks like a contained situation.
The situation involved a secretary at NBC News who late last month opened a piece of mail containing an unidentified white powder. Several days later, she developed a skin lesion which was treated, and she is doing fine.
The test of the powder was negative to anthrax. The skin test was positive to anthrax.
So where she touched the anthrax spores isn't clear. But the FBI seemed immediately certain it had nothing to do with the terrorist attacks on September the 11th or an earlier detection of anthrax at a Florida-based tabloid newspaper.
We see no connection whatsoever to 9/11. The way we would handle this is to open it as a separate criminal matter and proceed from there.
Nevertheless, officials in Washington suggested everyone should play it safe.
If you see anything suspicious, contact your local law enforcement officials.
Specifically, be prudent and call police if any unidentified powder is sent to you by mail. Contact your doctor if any recent skin lesions turn dark and start to grow, and seek aid if any flu-like symptoms cause severe inhalation problems. But also know this, courtesy of the U.S. Postal Service.
We have not ever seen any real incident, an incident, therefore, where actual biological hazards have been transmitted through the United States mails.
And on the broader issue of real terrorist threats, U.S. officials now confirm that the alert issued Thursday by the FBI was partially in response to warnings from foreign intelligence services. And there was no mention in those warnings of a chemical or biological threat. Dan?
Jim Stewart, live in Washington. It has not been proven that all these anthrax incidents involve the mail. But U.S. Postmaster General John Potter today urged Americans to be cautious when opening letters or parcels. The FBI has posted guidelines for handling suspicious mail on its website. They include don't open, shake, or bump the item, look for indicators like no return address or foreign postage, evaluate the situation and call 911. The FBI website is at fbi.gov, or read the guidelines at cbs.com, click on News. The anthrax case in New York could not come at a worse time for the city, still feeling the hurt of the World Trade Center attack. And CBS's Anthony Mason reports it wasn't the only anthrax scare for the city today.
For New York, it was another day on the front line of fear.
Sidewalk. Come on, let's go.
In the trenches of terrorist hysteria. In Rockefeller Center, an anthrax case at NBC.
You just feel so vulnerable now because you don't know what's going to happen, where it's going to happen.
In Times Square, another scare and more police barricades.
I'm an editor at the New York Times, but they won't let me through, and the only thing they told me was that there's an investigation.
The New York Times had received a suspicious letter.
That some powder was in an envelope, it was open.
Tests showed no apparent danger, but New Yorkers had another reason to worry.
Yeah. Checking your mail just took on a new meaning.
New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani cautioned,
people should not overreact to this.
But according to a new CBS News New York Times poll, nearly 3/4 of all New Yorkers fear another terrorist attack in their city.
We've all been expecting something, not necessarily at this building, but I think that we all feel something's going to happen. I just didn't think it would be here.
But panic never spread in the streets. In this hardened and still hustling city, they've learned to expect the unexpected.
Well, what I'm noticing is that everybody's out here on a beautiful Friday afternoon, and nobody's, letting it freak them out. And I think that says a lot.
But even the false alarms are having a cumulative effect on the city's psyche, and in some ways changing the distinctive character of one of the world's greatest cities. Dan?
Live here in New York City, Anthony Mason. In the Florida anthrax cases, tests given to almost 1,000 workers at the newspaper office in Boca Raton have come back negative. Some local postal workers are now being tested in case they unwittingly carried a contaminated package. One newspaper employee died last week from inhaled anthrax, and 2 others who tested positive for skin anthrax are doing well on antibiotics. There are a lot of fears about anthrax, what it is, how you can catch it, and the true extent of the risk. CBS's medical correspondent Elizabeth Callahan has facts on anthrax.
Anthrax spores can enter the human body 3 ways. As in Florida, the rarest and most deadly way is to inhale them. They can also be ingested if infected livestock is eaten. And finally, they can go through the skin in something called cutaneous anthrax, which is what happened to the NBC employee.
She is in good health, in good care.
Cutaneous anthrax is the most common and the mildest form of anthrax. There are about 2,000 cases worldwide and a handful of cases seen every year in the United States, most of those from people who work with animals. It is not easy to get. You cannot contract it by having spores land on you. They don't eat through healthy skin. But a small cut or abrasion would be enough to provide an entryway. From there, the first sign of infection would be a small pimple or ulcer, which would continue to grow into a black coal-like lesion. Anthrax got its name because an infection looks like anthracite or coal. Treatment involves antibiotics, Cipro, or penicillin.
With proper treatment, essentially no one should die from cutaneous anthrax, period.
As a precaution, a floor at NBC News was sealed off. CBS even closed its mailroom. But anthrax experts say small quantities of spores in the air or on surfaces cannot infect large numbers of people. The cases are isolated and localized.
It is not contagious. That's the first point. The building is shut down to prevent any further exposure, so that no one, if there's been a case there, then presumably there are anthrax spores in the building, and we don't want other people to get exposed.
Public health officials are walking a fine line here. On one hand, they must convince Americans that these unexplained incidents are no reason to panic. On the other hand, they themselves have so little experience with anthrax historically, they are also feeling their way through unsettling new terrain. Dan?
Elizabeth Callahan, thanks. For more context and facts on the threat of bioterror, we're joined now by retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Randy Larson. He directs the Institute for Homeland Security and teaches on that subject at the National War College. Colonel Larson is in our Washington Bureau. Colonel, given how rare a disease anthrax is in this country, is it fair or unfair to assume that America may be under some form of biological attack, and if so, by whom?
Well, I don't think there's any question, Dan, that America is under a biological attack tonight, and I'm not sure, I don't think the evidence is in yet, whether the New York case is even connected to the Florida case. But if it is an attack by Osama bin Laden, particularly let's look at Florida first, It's a very low-tech sort of attack, not the thing I've spent the last 7 years studying that keeps me awake at night. This is not that sort of attack. And it appears to me one of the best method to use a biological attack is with surprise. So I don't think that this is it demonstrates that Osama bin Laden is making this attack, or if he is, he's a very poor strategist, because our public health system is on top alert right now in this nation. And so, as your other experts have said, this is treatable. We have to catch it early like we are in these cases. We're going to see more of these, but this is not a serious threat, and it's not something people should be losing sleep over tonight.
Well, what do the American people need to know? Is there anything they should do?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about lately, animals are great sentinels. For you or I to be infected, Dan, we have to get 10 to 18,000 anthrax spores. That sounds like a lot, but it'll fit on the head of a pin. But a cow only needs 100. A cat is even a better sentinel. So if you have an animal or a pet that has died, you need to report that to your animal control unit. You need to report it to your local veterinarian. Cats are particularly good because it gets in their hair, they clean themselves, and they will be the first ones to show symptoms of anthrax. Early detection is the key.
Colonel, there are all kinds of wild scenarios, rumors floating around. What strikes you as a possible scenario that worries you?
Well, certainly not these, but the one that could be done, particularly if it was a nation state like Iraq was using some of the capability that we think they have, used in an indoor auditorium or something like that. It's very difficult to do outdoors, but used indoors, there could be a problem, and that's like the President said last night. We need to be on alert. If you're in an auditorium, a basketball stadium or something like that, and you see someone spraying something, you know, you have to do some visible things to release this into a crowd. Tell someone. That's very important. That early detection is the key.
Colonel Randy Larson, thanks.
Thank you.
At the White House today, President Bush gave his perspective on the threat of terror and reassured the public.
We cannot let the terrorists lock our country down. We can't let terrorists, a few evildoers, hold us hostage. They will not take this country down.
The president also said the government is doing, quote, everything in our power to keep Americans safe. Underscoring this, U.S. health officials report they have enough anthrax-fighting antibiotics to protect the public. Anthrax, war, terror, and threats of more. The USA is in an understandable state of anxiety, as CBS's Cynthia Bowers reports in tonight's Eye on America.
Near Denver today, hazmat crews were called to a local post office after white powder leaked from a parcel there. The powder turned out to be pudding, but the full force response is just another indication of just how jumpy Americans are these days.
I don't know what's going to happen next, so that's not like the life I used to have.
Today's report of another case of anthrax comes on the heels of yesterday's FBI warning, reinforced by the president that more terror attacks could be coming.
As we speak right now, I'm still scared walking around in the street right now.
Because that threat is so ill-defined, only that something could happen sometime, somewhere, there's extraordinary pressure to cover every base. In Atlanta, turnstiles were turned into security checkpoints this afternoon for thousands of fans who flocked to see the Braves-Astros playoff game. In Baltimore, all southbound trucks in the busy Harbor Tunnel were pulled to the side of the road for spot checks. Florida's governor ordered that state to stockpile vaccines and tighten restrictions for foreigners seeking driver's licenses. And in Chicago, concrete barricades and armed guards block access to the city's water supply around the clock.
We do not intend to take any chances.
Americans are being told to be prepared, but not for what? Not to panic, but given little reason not to.
What we're going through is a sense of anticipatory anxiety. We're afraid something's going to happen. We're not sure what it is, so we put our own fantasies on it.
Experts fear the constant threat of terror could lead to two different yet dangerous reactions. Some people may become afraid to leave home. Others may make the mistake of becoming less vigilant and more vulnerable. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Chicago.
CBS Next, assessing the Afghan bombing campaign and getting ready for round 2 in the air and on the ground.
It was my grandson's birthday. He just turned 3. We're going to move him out of his crib and buy him a big boy.
Except for a few daylight patrols by U.S. Navy fighter bombers, action in the skies over Afghanistan subsided on this Friday, the Muslim Day of Prayer. But CBS's David Martin reports this is to be only a brief lull, giving analysts a chance to assess damage.
The first set.
Taliban aircraft lined up like ducks in a row take direct hits from laser-guided bombs. U.S. officials say the Taliban have made little effort to disperse their forces to avoid the air attacks. But Defense Secretary Rumsfeld says he's not out just to destroy equipment. He wants to kill as many of Osama bin Laden's supporters and followers as he can.
The United States is seeking out concentrations of people who are involved in these terrorist activities and in the terrorist training camps and in the terrorist network. And when we find them, we do try to deal with them.
Long-range bombers have now carpet-bombed all of bin Laden's suspected training camps, although a satellite photo doesn't capture what that really means. 5,000-pound bunker-buster bombs have struck caves where terrorists might be hiding.
We know that they are moving, that their life is more difficult, that the places where they have stayed, some of them have disappeared.
The heavy bombers didn't fly because Friday is the Sabbath in Afghanistan, and the Navy took a break to replenish their weapons and fuel. But attacks against targets of opportunity are continuing, as are covert operations inside Afghanistan.
There will be some things that people will see. There will be some things that people won't see.
One thing people can't see is the carrier Kitty Hawk. Somewhere off the coast of Pakistan, it is transforming itself from the empty deck carrier that left Japan last week to one that looks like this, crammed with special operations forces and helicopters ready to go after bin Laden. It's early Saturday morning now in Afghanistan, and once again there are reports of large explosions in the capital of Kabul. Dan? From the Defense Department Live, David Martin. The 15,000 Muslims serving in the U.S. military today received the blessing of a panel of respected Muslim clerics from 3 Arab countries. They issued a fatwa, a formal ruling on Muslim faith and law, that denounces terrorism and endorses the morality of the war against it. This fatwa was requested by U.S. Army Captain Abdul Rashid Muhammad, who is the U.S. military's first Muslim chaplain. Ahead here on CBS, we take you deep inside Afghanistan and hear from people fleeing the capital who say the U.S. attack is working.
Tens of thousands of people continue to purchase new Oldsmobiles.
What kind of men will it take to get our hands on Osama bin Laden? Men just like the ones you'll meet Sunday on 60 Minutes.
Inside Afghanistan tonight, countless thousands of civilians, many of them women, are on the move in search of safe haven from war and the harsh rule of the Taliban. CBS's Jim Axelrod reports many are finding a measure of safety in the north behind the lines of the anti-Taliban alliance, the United Front.
In northern Afghanistan, it's a call to prayer, not arms. In dusty villages along the front, like Pule Mugalan, the guns of the anti-Taliban Mujahideen are quiet now that the U.S. has told the United Front to hold back on its attempt to take Kabul. But there is movement across the lines. 17 refugees from Kabul are packed into this truck. More cling to the roof. Eyewitnesses to the strikes. In Kabul, they say, only military targets have been hit. No civilians are killed, says this man. Only the Taliban are killed. They say that civilians are killed to stop America's attacks. They announced that. It's wrong. Kabul, they say, is a ghost town. Planes overhead keep people inside. Even the Taliban soldiers leave at night to avoid the bombs. The Taliban is weak, he says. I want God to remove them from our country and replace them with these mujahideen.
The refugees started their journey before dawn, driving to a place called Giyawa, the last village in Taliban-controlled territory. There, we've been told, they were systematically robbed before having to walk 2 more hours through a no-man's land to reach relative safety.
It's a trip, they say, the Taliban's made necessary. They've started to arrest people, says this man. Before the attacks, they didn't arrest anyone. Now they've started to arrest. So for now, they'll call this village home, hoping to retrace their path back to Kabul soon. I hope to see you in Kabul, says this man, and talk to you there. For this truckload of refugees and scores of others just like them, those would be answered prayers. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, Pule-Mugalan, Afghanistan.
Islamic radicals in Pakistan had called for massive anti-American protest after prayers today, hoping millions would take to the streets. It didn't happen. There were some protests around the country, but smaller than the government had feared and kept largely under control by thousands of riot police and paramilitary troops. There's much more news ahead on this expanded edition of the CBS Evening News, so stay here with us.
My business is more than just a business to me. It's my passion. So when my doctor told me I have asthma, I went to cbshealthwatch.com. One click on Smart Search gives me exactly what I need to know about controlling my asthma, from medications to new treatments. With CBS Health Watch, I spend less time searching and more time doing the things I love.
Save time, get answers. Visit cbshealthwatch.com.
I'm every man.
And every woman who ever suffered from frequent, persistent heartburn.
If you've treated your terrorist attacks and turmoil, what do you teach your kids about good and bad? America Fights Back next week on The Early Show with Bryant Gumbel and Jane Clayson.
Americans have been showing their patriotism in so many ways. Today at 2 Eastern Time, President Bush led students nationwide in pledging allegiance to the flag.
Yes, to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Some CBS stations will be returning now to local programming. If you're leaving us now, we invite you to join us again at 10, 9 Central for a special edition of 48 Hours. For many of you, this special fact-filled edition of the CBS Evening News will continue.
This is CBS.
Volunteer News at 7 is brought to you by Lance Cunningham Ford.
Cleanup continues at the site of the World Trade Center. Coming up, we'll hear from 2 East Tennessee officials on what they experienced while working on the scene.
And we'll hear the 911 tapes from a shooting on Baxter Avenue that left one man dead.
Local kids are helping to raise money for the children in Afghanistan. On Volunteer TV's Kylie Niles. Coming up, we'll have their story.
This is WVLT TV, Knoxville. Right now, WVLT Volunteer TV News at 7 is taking action for you.
A domestic violence call leads to a shootout for 2 police officers today. Good evening, I'm Liz Tadone.
And I'm Alan Williams. Thanks for joining us. Around 9:30 this morning, Tracy McGee went to the Baxter Avenue Fire Department looking for protection from her husband, Jimmy. When police arrived on the scene, they found McGee's husband waving a gun in the air. Police urged the suspect to drop the gun, and when McGee pointed the gun towards the officers, police say they had no choice but to act.
Ma'am?
There's shots been fired. Shots been fired.
Ma'am. 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 Ma'am, I need you to calm down. You're on a cell phone. Ma'am.
Police tell us Jimmy McGee was pronounced dead on the scene. The 2 officers involved, Matthew Cook and Brian Leatherwood, were not injured in today's shooting. They had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation.
Now here's the latest on the U.S. airstrikes over Afghanistan. The House overwhelmingly approved legislation that gives police new powers in the fight against terrorism. And a federal grand jury indicted an Arizona man for allegedly giving false statements to the FBI in the terror attack investigation. The planned bombing campaign in Afghanistan has been tapered off because of the Muslim holiday today, and in the meantime, U.S. aircraft are in the Afghanistan skies looking for new targets.
Some members of an East Tennessee Air National Guard unit are now taking part in Operation Enduring Freedom. 2 groups from the 228th Combat Communications Squadron were deployed from McGee-Tyson Thursday. The 228th is responsible for providing radio and satellite communications. A 228th spokesman says the group is anxious about their mission.
Oh, there's always a little bit of apprehension, but basically they're all chomping at the bit. You have to understand that these people come to drill, to train once a month. They go to annual training for 2 weeks every year. to train, and their sole mission is this job.
The 18th Airlift Wing from Nashville is the other Guard troop from Tennessee taking part in the mission. And in Kentucky, National Guardsmen are on their way to Fort Bragg, North Carolina as part of Operation Noble Eagle. Close to 70 military police officers said their goodbyes as they left for what could be 1 year of service. Family members are thankful that the troops will stay in the U.S. because of the opportunities to visit. But troops know it's time to take care of business, and this is the first large group of Kentucky Guardsmen to be called up for a home front defense detail.
Well, airlines are not checking enough bags. That's the word out tonight by the Transportation Department's Inspector General. Neither McGee Tyson officials nor GAT Security, the company in charge of baggage security at the airport, would comment on the department's findings. The report shows several airports in the country were not scanning all bags through bomb detection machines.
Every bag really can't be scanned today because there are just not enough pieces of equipment in enough airports to do all of that.
Both the airport and GAT security officials say McGee Tyson scores as one of the safest airports in the country. We've seen the pictures of the horrific aftermath of what's left of the World Trade Center towers.
3 East Tennesseans had the unenviable task of identifying, processing, and releasing the remains to the next of kin. Now back home, they gave us some insight into what they faced when they arrived.
When you stand there and realize that beneath that rubble are 5,000 or more people, it's pretty much overwhelming. You know, we're human too.
Fred Berry Jr., Lieutenant Steve Tender of the Knoxville Police Department, and Art Bohannon of the KPD, who's not shown, spent close to 3 weeks at what has been termed Ground Zero. Their purpose? Identify bodies. A disaster mortuary team, if you will, simply called DMORT.
We got a call within 4 hours after the incident to start deploying our people. I was ordered to get between,
as well as what's going on